Well, I think it's actually important to say that that I didn't discover honey foe, and I've never claimed to have discovered it. And in fact, interestingly enough, if you go back far enough and you speak to some of the guys from these local islands, hundreds of years ago, and even up until about 10 years ago, they were still hunting the whale sharks here, and some of the mantas. So this area has been known about by the local communities, by the fishermen, and then by the first people who started diving in the Maldives. But slowly, more and more people came to know about it. And it wasn't until I came here and started doing research, I guess, that I was able to understand a little bit more about not just that you could see animals here, but when you could see them. Because we knew that there was certain things to do with the tide and the time of the year, obviously, but to really be able to predict when you're going to see the animals, that obviously helps. So I guess I was just here at the right time, and my work has been talked about, and it's been on the TV, and it's been in the magazines, but I wouldn't say that I discovered it. I've always tried to be as open with everything that I do. So the idea of doing the research was because I'm fascinated by manta rays. I wanted to learn more about them. But ultimately, I think that it's very important that we protect the manta rays in this country, purely because, firstly, because they're important for the ecosystem, but also because they're extremely valuable. They're valuable assets, if you like. The Maldives tourism industry depends heavily on its marine animals, and the manta rays are, they're right at the top of the list of things that people want to see. If you ask a diver that comes to the Maldives, what's your wish list of things to see, and they'll put it at the top, whale shark, manta rays, reef sharks, turtles. These are all things that they really want to see, and they pay a lot of money to come and see. And manta rays, as we've seen from this site, people from all over the world are coming here to see them, and they're paying a lot of money to come here and see them. And so mantas are valuable. And so my work, the idea of it is to try and use tourism in a sustainable way, which means you have to have management of that tourism. You can't just let anybody and everybody do whatever they want, because ultimately there will be an overrunning of tourism. There'll be too much of a good thing. So we have to have regulations, and we have to have awareness. So I'm trying to raise awareness by educating people, by trying to lead by example, and trying to use my research to help the local communities and the tourism industry, and everybody benefit. Well, manta rays are they're big animals, and they are a very good indicator of the overall health of the reef, because they're feeding on very small animals, these tiny planktonic creatures. They for the Maldives to have a large population of manta rays and a healthy population, that tells us that the basic ecosystem as a whole is healthy. Because, and a good example of that would be that my studies in the last few years have tried to look at how often the animals are giving birth. And so if a population is healthy, and there's lots of food, then the female manta rays will be giving birth to babies, and they give birth to one pup, and it takes them over 1 year. They're pregnant for over 1 year, and she will give birth to one pup. But if there's a problem with the amount of food around, maybe there's a problem with the monsoon conditions and not bringing as much food as normal, there's a change in the climate of the Maldives, that will disrupt the ability of the manta rays to reproduce. For me, the most interesting thing would be how some of the individuals are very, very habitual in their nature. They love to stay in the same place. And while they move around, they always come back to the same areas. So some of these animals which are out here that are feeding here today, we'll see the same animals again and again and again and again. Each week, each year, they come back to the same areas. So you get to recognize and you get to know some of the animals very, very well, because I recognize each individual with their spots on the underside. And we use the cameras to take pictures, and we, just like we all have different faces, we can recognize each other. The manta rays all have different spots. So that's really, really useful from a science point of view, because we take a picture and we can recognize the different manta rays. And because of this, we're able to also go back in the past and look at people's pictures. You know, people who used to take images of manta rays here back in the 1980s. And one gentleman, Mustaq Hussain, who's a diver in the Maldives, he showed me some pictures of his that he took back in 1989, I think, of some manta rays that still today are swimming around at the same place that he was diving with them over 22 years ago. So what we know from that is that these animals live for a very long time, and we think that manta rays are living 50, 60, 70, maybe even 100 years. So that they are living a very long time and they're reproducing very, very slowly, and that means that they are very vulnerable to any overfishing or any threats to their survival. This country is a beautiful country. It's a very long, drawn-out country. So there's manta rays, you know, throughout the archipelago. But there are some areas which have concentrations, if you like, hotspots of manta rays at certain times. And this area in Ba Atoll at this time of year is definitely an area where we have a very large congregation or aggregation of manta rays. And I've recorded over 2,000 individual manta rays in the Maldives, and there's probably 6,000 or 7,000 across the whole country. But over 1,200 of those that I have recorded have been seen here alone in Hanifaro. So this area is definitely an extremely important aggregation site. But at other times of the year, the mantas are spreading out and they're going back to the other atolls and they're moving around. So they're not here all the time, but it is definitely one of the important areas. From the research that I've done, it seems that the manta rays here, the reef manta rays, they are resident to this country. So they're not leaving the Maldives, they're not going to, say, Sri Lanka. And that's very good, because in Sri Lanka they're fishing the manta rays, they're killing a lot. And so if we can protect the manta rays here, and we can ensure that we manage them sustainably, in other words, we don't fish them, and we protect the areas where they aggregate, these areas which are important for tourism but also for the animals. If we can do that, then I think we have a very good chance of ensuring that manta rays continue to be in this country in large numbers for many years to come. And that's a real testament to the Maldives, to the fact that the Maldives has been able to and does have this positive approach to the conservation of its marine life. There's very few places in the world which are like that. Most places there is competing pressures through fisheries, for example, to fish these marine animals, which can be, generating revenue in other areas. But in the Maldives, because tourism is so important, these animals, as a consequence, are also very important to the tourism, and therefore they have a greater sense of protection. I think that will be very important for the future for the manta rays here. They're here in Hanifaro because of the food, and this unique structure of this tiny little bay that traps the plankton. The plankton forms these dense patches, and the manta rays, they've learned to follow the tide. They follow the tide into the bay and they feed on the plankton. So they're here to feed, and if there's no food, there's no mantas. alani berumi turun turun. What I've seen in the last 2 years is that out of a population of many thousands of manta rays, and so there are more than 1,000 or so mature females in this country, that not one of them has been recorded pregnant in the last 2 years. And that is very concerning for me because prior to that, back in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I was seeing lots of pregnant manta rays, but in the last 2 years there's been nothing. And that possibly could be linked to problems with the El Nino that we had last year. This year, if you ask anybody, the fishermen, or you ask the people who work on the boats, they will tell you that the conditions, the monsoon is not as normal this year. It took a very long time to start, and I think this has had an impact again on the animals. There's a lack of feeding. I think that it's probably just a cycle that's connected to these natural phenomena, and that I hope next year we have more favourable conditions and the mantas will become, we'll see some pregnancies again. I'm sure that this is all a natural flow of things, but what we might be doing is we might be making more of an impact than would naturally be occurring. In other words, when these El Ninos occur in the past, they might have an impact on the manta rays, but now because we're having more El Ninos and they're becoming more severe, maybe there is more of an impact on the manta ray population, which could be a negative thing. It's very difficult to say, okay, no mantas are pregnant, therefore it must be because of this. We don't really know, but all I'm saying is that there is a concern that we should try to think about, and the only way that we're aware of these concerns is because we're doing the science. And this is why I feel it's extremely important to do the science, to be able to answer and be aware of some of these problems, to then try and look at ways of creating solutions. And I don't think we have to be worried that the manta rays in the Maldives are just going to disappear, but I just think that we need to just study them and learn more about them and learn how our impacts are going to be affecting them.
Generally the best time to see mantas is just after the new moon, and that's when the lunar currents are the strongest. So here at Honeyflower Bay we have of course the lunar currents which are coming from one side and the southwest monsoon. So both of these collide and create a back eddy in the bay. So that's what is required for the ideal conditions. So unfortunately we're not having a new moon at the moment. So conditions are not ideal. Of course we can hope. I mean, it's hard to predict these things, you can just come every day, record everything and hope for the best. Yeah, I mean, we can kill a bit more now once we get into the water and actually see if there's any zooplankton. And if there is zooplankton, there'll be a good chance that the mantas come along because they're quite good at finding that out. Cool.
Well, Honeyflower is this whole reef system, including the island, has been declared a marine protected area by the President in 2009. So for 2 years now, this has been a marine protected area, and that's fantastic. And with the marine protected area, you have some regulations which prevent, for example, fishing inside the areas. It also has restrictions on the number of people and the way that they conduct themselves to try and minimize the impact of tourism on the feeding area. And then this year, with the designation of Ba Atoll as a World Biosphere Reserve, there will also be a next step in the form of a management plan to try and further ensure that this area remains protected and that it's managed properly. And that will involve having a ranger here. At the moment we have an Environmental Protection Agency ranger who's on site during the busy season here to make sure that the regulations that have been created by the government are adhered to. And so this is really important, because it's one thing to have rules and you can say, okay, these are the rules, this is now protected and you must do this. But if there's nobody there to enforce the rules, if you don't have a government official whose job it is to make sure that people are doing the right thing, then it's very difficult for these regulations to be adhered to, because there's always somebody who's prepared to break the rules. And unfortunately, even though the idea of these regulations is so that nobody's excluded, everybody will be able to continue to come to Hani Faro, they will be able to continue to see the animals, but there ultimately has to be a restriction, because there cannot be an unlimited free access for everybody. Because if you have the sheer number of people wanting to visit this site that we get, it's just not safe and it's not sustainable for the animals or for the people, and it's not enjoyable for somebody to be in the water with 200 other people. That's just too much. And so you have to have therefore some way of controlling the tourism. You have to put some restriction on the numbers, and I think everybody would agree there has to be some control. And when you have control, therefore there has to be some management plan to actually enforce and regulate, and that's what we're trying to do. And unfortunately that upsets a few people, because it's a change to what they're used to. My goal for the Manta Research Project is that, this should be a project which helps to benefit manta rays, their habitat, and the Maldivian communities where these animals are being found, so that everybody benefits. The animals benefit, in other words, they continue to be protected, and that the areas that they live are protected, and that the local people who depend on these ecosystems, the people that live in Bayatul, they depend on the reefs here for food. They depend on the reefs here for jobs through tourism, and they should be financially and intrinsically benefiting from having these natural resources. And so the Manta project, I hope in the future, will work with everybody, the government, the local communities, the stakeholders, to ensure that all of that happens. And ultimately it should be a project which is a Maldivian run and a Maldivian project that they themselves, you yourself, can continue to into the future. My advice to the young generation would be to get out and experience for yourself the beautiful marine life that you have here. And anybody that wants to come and see the manta rays, all they have to do is pick up the phone, give me a call, send me an email, call the resort, speak to the atoll councillors or speak to the government, and they can come out on the research boat. We can take schools out and we can show them the manta rays, because I really think that the younger generation need to have a connection to the ocean. They need to be in the ocean, they need to go and see these animals, and they need to, for themselves, to appreciate how beautiful they are. Because all these people from all over the world are paying all this money to come here to see these animals, but not enough Maldivian kids get to see them themselves, and they shouldn't have to pay to do that. They should be, they should all be given the opportunity to appreciate what they have, and then once you have that appreciation, then they themselves become the strongest conservationists that are out there. They become passionate about wanting to help protect this environment. Amadei, who's on the boat with us at the moment, he's going to be with the project here for the next couple of months, and he's a young Maldivian who's really, really enthusiastic and passionate about the marine life, and if there's any young kids out there that want to come and spend some time learning about manta rays, then they're more than welcome, and we'll try and make it happen.
Annani